RadioNext.tv on the Cool Groove site. You are listening to Warp and Woof Radio. Dr. Mark Eckel, Harold H.B. Bell, and today you do not want to miss this topic. Dr. Mark, how are you, partner?
I'm doing real well today. A little wet in Indianapolis, but otherwise we're doing wonderful.
Oh, liquid sunshine, as we like to call it. Without this, we don't get those beautiful things that come from it after the rain. Today we're going to be talking about human trafficking, which is, it's running rampant in our country right now. And there's some very, very surprising things that you might not know. Yep. So tell them who our guests are going to be, and then we're going to play our one song and get right back at it.
Shaana Robrock is here from DestinyRescue.org. Shaana was a student of mine way back in the day, back in the 90s, and a high school student. And she has been over to Thailand 5 times leading trips for Destiny Rescue. We're really excited about what she has to share with us today and anxious to promote DestinyRescue.org.
Please tell somebody to tell somebody. Go to www.radionext.tv and tell them to hit the Cool Groove site. Today's show you do not want to miss. You are listening to Warp and Woof Radio on the Cool Groove site. RadioNext.tv on the Cool Groove site, Warp and Woof Radio, sponsored by the Comenius Institute and Dr. Mark Eckel. Before we dive into today's subject matter, please explain who, what, and where people can get in touch with Comenius Institute.
Absolutely. So Comenius, John Amos Comenius, the great Moravian pastor from the 18th century who actually believed that women should go to school. Not to mention the fact that everybody learns differently, and he actually was the progenitor, the guy who gave us the encyclopedia. So Comenius is the stalwart name of our institute. We are one of 30 study centers around the United States, and we are located at IUPUI, and we are giving ourselves to helping young people making the transition from high school into college. One of the big stats we know is that 75% of those who attend public university from Christian backgrounds actually leave the faith. So we're really interested in making sure that doesn't happen. We, of course, podcast all of our programs. You can find them at warpandwoof.org. That's WARPANDWOOF.org. And we are anxious to meet with you, connect with you. Shoot me an email at eckel1957@gmail, or find me on Facebook, Twitter, all kinds of social media, man.
Awesome, man. And before we get into today's show, we just want to welcome my newest intern in the house, Mr. Richard Knowles, soon to be sophomore at Trenton Central High School. So he's learning a little bit, and this is a great show for him to be a part of, because we're talking about fighting against sex trafficking, especially those that are minors. Today we're going to have in studio with us Shaana Robrock, and she has an organization, DestinyRescue.org, that we're going to be talking to her about.
That's right.
But as we get in this, and we always go into Proverbs,
That's right.
How Proverb is relevant to everything and anything that goes on in our daily life. The first question that I have is, what does Proverbs say about protecting children?
Oh, man, I'm telling you, that it is just so deep in Proverbs about taking care of people who can't take care of themselves. So I'm going to hit 3 major passages here. Let me start with Proverbs 14:31. He who oppresses the poor reproaches his maker, but he who is gracious to the needy honors him. So the word oppresses literally means to have contempt, an attitude of contempt. And that attitude is coming from those who have power and riches and money. And that's the real issue that we have here. So when we're talking about young children being sexually exploited, we're talking about people who are coming into these relationships who have power and money, and they can subjugate these young people. The second line of that statement, Proverbs 14:31, says, one honoring him favors the needy. So the one's attitude toward the needy, if we're favorable toward those who have need of us, actually shows our real attitude toward God. So if we're actually reaching out, helping, being concerned for, taking care of those who are needy, that really demonstrates what we think about who God is. Proverbs 16:8 is the second one. This statement says, better is a little with righteousness than great income with injustice. I'll read that again. Better is a little with righteousness than a great income with injustice. This is not simply a poverty better than riches bit. This is justice over injustice. So anytime we see injustice, we ought to become angry, frankly, righteously indignant about what's going on around us. And so Proverbs 16:8 speaks to that. And then Proverbs 24:10-12. This is the passage. Here's the passage. It says this: "Deliver those who are being taken away to death, and those who are staggering to slaughter. Oh, hold them back. If you say, 'Oh, we didn't know this,' does he not consider it who weighs the hearts? And does he not know it who keeps your soul? And will he not render to man according to his work?" Basically, all excuses are removed. So if you're listening to this or to the podcast, you now know. The phrase "I didn't know" is a lame excuse. Proverbs 24:10-12 eradicates it, man.
So that's lame.
That's right.
Now you know.
Now you know.
And now that you know, we need to know whose responsibility is it from a biblical standpoint to defend our little people.
Isn't that the truth, man? I'll tell you, HB, there are very few things in this life that just get me immediately mad. This is one of them.
Yeah.
So right now, inside of me, I'm just shaking because this kind of thing makes my blood boil. I used to tell my students, one of my many mantras is "all means all," and that's all means. So when
do that one more time.
All means all, and that's all means. So when you're going to ask me who should defend little ones, everybody. That means everybody. So I'm just going to run through a quick list. Parents ought to be aware and look for ways to prevent. We're going to be talking about some situations here in a few minutes about some things that have actually happened to folks. At the home, we're talking about grandparents. We're talking about relatives. Everybody needs to step up and think about what these little ones are going through and how we protect them. Neighbors. You know that big white button in the suburbs? You hit that, your garage door comes down, man. That is a real problem for us. And like the Miko Southern said when we first started our radio show, we need more big mamas around. Remember when he said that?
Definitely.
So somebody who's going to stand in the breach. Churches, youth groups, community partnerships in churches. This ought to be happening. In our communities need to inform. Pastors, man, I got to say a shout out to the pastors. Pastors, we need to preach this. We need to use illustrations from this. You want to talk about justice and injustice? You need to talk about these kinds of things. So when I'm talking about this with folks, I'm generally talking about 6 concentric circles that start in the home and go all the way out to the federal government. And I'm saying to you, like I say to everybody, federal government is last, man. Don't be going to the federal government for all the things you think you need. It starts in the home. Be proactive, be protective, be pro-participation, be pro-responsibility.
Exactly.
Everybody needs to step up.
I boil too because I look at this sharp, bright-eyed little brother right here, and I'm telling you, if somebody comes at him, boy, they've got some wrath to deal with.
That's right.
And speaking of wrath,
oh boy, here we go.
Come on, man. How does Jesus respond to those who would bring harm to some children? I mean, he's a cool dude throughout the Bible until when his wrath comes down.
That's right.
Talk about it.
Push comes to shove. Some people think Jesus is some kind of wimp, because they think that somehow he's always just talking about grace and mercy and love and peace. Man, you don't know Jesus. You got to go back and reread the New Testament again. Jesus grew up in a carpenter shop. When you grow up in a carpenter shop in the first century, we're talking about growing some guns. Those of you who don't know what guns are, we're talking about bicep, tricep, man. And you need to go down to the weight room to think about that. But Jesus had them because he was actually hard working. Yes, he preached about love and mercy and peace. But guess what? He also preached about justice and righteousness. In fact, Jesus talked more about hell than anybody else in the Bible. Go check this out. Talked more about hell than anybody else in the Bible. But here's what I want to bring here about Jesus. When Jesus speaks, he says this: it would be better for for this person, whoever this person is, if a millstone were hung around his neck and he were cast into the sea, than that he should cause one of my little ones to sin. We can find that in Luke 17:2. You can also find it in Matthew 18 and Mark 9. Be better to have a millstone hung around your neck and be cast into the sea than to hurt a little one. A millstone. Let's talk about what that means. A millstone weighs hundreds, if not thousands of pounds, depending on the kind of thing that we're talking about here. Go Google it, Bing it, whatever. Check it out. Find a millstone in ancient times. And what you'll discover is that people hewed these rocks hewed rocks, and then created these stones that were used to separate wheat from chaff. So when you stop to think about what it means to have a millstone hung around your neck, think about what the mafia says. We're gonna put you in cement boots, man. That means when you hit the sea, you're going down and not coming back up. You're weighting a body to keep it in the water. I don't know that Jesus' response to the harm of children can get any more graphic, can get any more serious, but you best not be bringing to me that Jesus is some kind of wimp, man, because he is not. And when he's talking about little ones, protecting them, check this out. Millstone around your neck.
And on that note, we're going to take our first break. You are listening to Warp and Woof Radio, Comenius Institute on the RadioNext.tv on the Cool Groove site, Warp and Woof Radio, Comenius Institute, and just having a great discussion up in here and off air. I told you I love the man when I got my young little brothers around, man. I love it, because this is the best way to educate and teach.
That's right.
Let them be around, feel it, touch it, taste it. Because we can do all the lip service we want, but until they actually see it and be around it, proof hidden in that pudding. So,
absolutely.
And we're talking today about sex trafficking, which is, it is outrageous the number of young people in the last 10 years that have been affected by human trafficking. People are preying on our babies, and I don't know if the people out here understand how serious it is and how vanilla, I guess would be a good word to call it, because we think about movies and people getting kidnapped and thrown into the back of vans and then being taken to Las Vegas to become sex slaves, and that's the farthest thing from the truth when we're talking about this, Mark. So since we hear about sex trafficking in like Southeast Asia and all that, talk about where it's sitting for real.
Oh man, so I'm stumbling around here because I don't even know where to start. There's so many things to talk about. So I was checking out some things about the Indianapolis 500, for instance. And the Indianapolis 500 every single year is concerned about sex trafficking during the races, because there are so many people who are literally looking for sex because, again, as we said in the first segment, for their power and their money, all the things that they already have. So they're looking for their boys, they're looking for girls, they're looking for teenagers, they're looking for anybody that they can prey upon. So the Indianapolis 500, go check this out, again, on Google someplace, and just see how much trouble that they're even having in places like this. Or check out something like WTHR here in town, 13 News, and check out a local group that has been established to prevent human trafficking. This actually is established by a young woman whose name is Tina Front, and she does a documentary entitled Against Their Will. And this was promoted and shown on WTHR.com, so you can go over there to their website and check out the local group that helps prevent human trafficking. And this young woman was herself a sex slave for some time. And then here's another example of this, and a lot of people think that somehow this just is taking place in cities. This is only taking place with the poor, which obviously it does to the great extent. However, even in Carmel, so we're talking about up north in some of the richer suburbs. Here's the title of this article from the Indianapolis Star: "My World Just Stopped. Sex Trafficking Hits Home in Carmel." Here's this mom who back in 2012 gets a phone call from out in the West Coast, and here's this police detective saying, look, your daughter was out here visiting, but somebody tried to abduct her, and we wanted to make sure that you knew what was going on. And one of the lines in the article is, "I just wanted to vomit." Every single parent who's hearing these kinds of things is going to react the exact same way. Here's an article from Nuvo, N-U-V-O, for those of you who are not sure what that is. Nuvo is an indie news place, and by indie I mean I-N-D-I-E news, that is independent. And some of these articles that I've been reading about the sex trafficking of minors have to do with drug sellers who literally are switching to human selling because the profit margin is huge. So here's just one example. One person in the sex slave industry can make a pimp over $1,000 a week. So when you stop to think about this, $1,000 a week from one individual, you can imagine what people are doing in their injustices and awfulness to these people that are being held in slavery. The numbers are huge and awful. 45 million people are held in slavery worldwide. 2 million of those people are children. $150 billion, that's with a B, Jesus, is generated each year by human trafficking. I could go on and on and on, HB, with these stats, but it's just an awful, awful thing, and it's happening right here in our city.
In our backyards. And
Yep.
Here's the thing, people. It's non-discriminatory. As
That's
you
right.
mentioned, they don't care if you're poor, if you come from a rich
Yep.
home in Carmel. People are preying on our young people and seducing them with drugs, with tennis shoes, with clothing,
Yep.
making these people slaves now. So what kind of readings that are out there culturally that we can do to learn more about sex
Right.
trafficking?
So I got to tell you about this magazine that some people have heard about. I suspect many have not. This actually comes out of Biola University. It's called Salvo. I'll spell that SALVO. So if you go to Salvo Mag, that's SALVOMAG.com, you'll find this article there on sex trafficking. I gave a shout out this morning to Heather Ziegler, who actually wrote this. And there are 3 pieces on this sex trafficking article. The first is about all the numbers. So some of the numbers I was just telling you about, the money that's being accrued by this, what's happening in the United States. One of the principal concerns that law enforcement is about here is about what happens at sporting events. We're talking in this article about the legalities, the manipulation tactics, some of these things, HB, you were mentioning just a moment ago, the implications and effects of the physical, psychological imposition on these young people that go through it. And then the second part of her article talks about the internet connection. And so how many people are being lured by this on the internet? There's a story in the Atlantic Monthly, for instance, about this. A young person who was 17 at the time, lured into sex slavery via Facebook. So when I'm talking, in the last segment I talked about being at home, mom, dad, aunts, uncles, grandparents, being aware of what's going on with your young people on the internet. This is huge. There's a section even here from Huffington Post on parental advice. And then the last segment is about sex slavery and terrorism. I suspect if you're watching the news at all, this is probably the thing that you know most about. But the issue of terrorism, terrorists are doing awful things to young people. You saw what happened at Boko Haram, for instance, in Nigeria. They stole over 300 young ladies, and they abducted them, raped them, impregnated them. This is an awful thing that's going on, obviously in Indianapolis, but also around the world. And the issue of terrorism isn't just something that happens overseas. It's happening here for us. And the terror of being sexually abused and enslaved by itself is terrorism.
And you know, Mark, we were just gracious to have IMPD Chief Riggs in the house yesterday. He was on Greg Merriweather's show and was saying that the new thing now is forced heroin addiction, where they're holding kids down and shooting them up with heroin to make them become addicted to the drug. And now they're like zombies pretty much, and in control of these individuals. Before we go to our third break, politics.
Yeah.
I'm one like this. Right is right. And we say do good, do good,
Yep,
do good.
that's right.
And that doesn't have a label. And you just said something very poignant about all means all, and that's all that all means.
That's right.
Politics. How
Yep.
does this play a role in this? And is there a political persuasion over another that we can help fight this serious crime?
Sure, absolutely. We've said this many times, you and I, on the air. It doesn't matter if you have an R, a D, or an I after your name. If you're serving in the State House, what is the most important thing that you do if you hold a position of authority? Government is to protect the people it serves. Let me say that again. Government's responsibility, its main responsibility, local, state, federal, is to keep its people safe. One of the passages from Proverbs I didn't read earlier was from Proverbs 16:12. It reads this way: "It's an abomination for kings to commit wickedness, for a throne is established on righteousness. So the idea, the upshot of this verse is that the king should react to sin just as much as God does. So you've got the three legs of the responsibility of government: legislative, executive, and judicial. Whatever we do in government, who is responsible to do something at government, we have a responsibility to step up and to make them step up to their responsibilities. But judging by the numbers, sex traffickers know that they have less than a 1% chance of arrest. I'll say that again. They already know they have less than a 1% chance of arrest. The biggest problem, HB, is people are not speaking up. So those people who have been abducted, those people who know what's going on, need to step up. Later in the show, we're going to be hearing from Corey Nichols of Destiny Rescue, who will be calling in actually to the show to tell us the 3 things we can do to help stop sex trafficking. But let me just point you to something that goes on in our state. If you just type in in.gov, so that's indiana.gov, and you look up sex trafficking, you'll see all kinds of things. And here's something I just saw this morning, HB, and I thought of you and your brother who drives one of the big rigs, the 18-wheelers. Here's one of the statements on in.gov from the Attorney General. Indiana truck drivers can join the fight against sex trafficking. Why is that? Because so much of what goes on in this respect goes on at truck stops and travel plazas in the form of pimp control and brothels, fronting as massage parlors.
Wow.
So even truck drivers can begin investing themselves in this. And if you're looking for something to do as it relates to sex trafficking, as it relates to this awful issue that we're dealing with here today, there's a national conference that's going to be going on in Dallas, Texas. It's being promoted on the in.gov site. It's the 28th Annual Crimes Against Children Conference, August 8 to 11 this year down in Dallas, Texas, the Sheraton Hotel down there in Dallas. Make sure to check this out, Crimes Against Children Conference. But you can find all these things at in.gov. So I'm going to come back and I'm going to say what I said to begin this little piece. If you are a Republican, if you are a Democrat, if you are an independent, I don't care. Keep your people safe. That's your responsibility, local, state, federal. You see these kinds of things taking place in Indiana. The Indiana government is stepping up. They're pointing these kinds of things out. They're reaching out even to truck drivers who are saying, hey, look, you can do something about this. All you have to do is speak up. And that is the key concern for us. And when we come back, after this next break, man, we are going to talk about some engagement from the Christian emphasis of this. We're going to talk about all different kinds of agencies. We're going to talk about some movies, and some movies that are really going to move us to action, I think. And that's really going to be powerful stuff.
Awesome. And you are listening to Warp and Woof Radio, the Comenius Institute sponsored show, and we are getting in deep today. And we ask you, please, if you know some people with some young adults, 18, 15-year-old people, have them tune into this show. In the second hour, we're going to find out how we can eliminate this horrific crime here in the city of Indianapolis and around the world. You're listening to RadioNext.TV on the Cool Groove site. You are listening to Warp and Woof Radio on the Cool Groove site. And our guest has just arrived, and we cannot wait to hear what the experts have to say. Shaana Robrock, DestinyRescue.org is in the house. And as we go to this last segment, Dr. Mark, we must say hello to Ma Eckel and your wonderful wife, Robin. We don't do that. We don't do that. I'm out of the family. So, you know.
That's right.
Make sure that we give them their love and their due. We're talking about sex trafficking here today. If you're just joining us at the Warp and Woof Radio show, and we've been discussing what it is, how it manifests itself, and the misconceptions that we have as a general public about what sex trafficking is. Tell me, how do we raise awareness and social issues about things like sex trafficking, Mark?
Sure. You know, I was sitting early this morning. I think I woke up about 3:30 this morning, started working on these things, and I kept thinking to myself, you know, what's my responsibility? What's my role? And I kept, you know, the Spirit kept prompting me to think this one thought over and over again, the radio show. What we can do through this radio show in acquainting people with all kinds of issues, all kinds of things that impact us as human beings, this show is going to do those kinds of things. And so one of the great things that we get to do is we get to introduce folks to lots of different great groups. So destinyrescue.org, that's going to be a website that you need to go visit if you're listening live or looking at the podcast right now. And of course, our focus in this particular program is right out of Titus 3, the three commandments there. Do good, do good, do good. And you know, HB, we can't do everything. I mean, there are certain things that we see around us and we say, you know, I'm spread so thin, I can't continue to do whatever it is that I see right in front of me. I say the same thing to everybody all the time. You can't do everything, but do something. Do something. So ask yourself, what are my God-gifted, God-given passions? What wakes me up in the middle of the night? What gets my blood going or my tears flowing? And so those are the kinds of questions we need to be addressing and asking ourselves. So I got 5 I words for us. I think I come up with 5 things every week, something like this. So I want to just mention these ideas. Number 1 is identify. You need to identify not only what your own passions are, but specific issues that really you want to engage. Then the second is individuals. Individuals make a difference. You don't have to be part of the government. You have to be part of a group. All you need to do is be a neighbor and look and see outside your window. Those kinds of things I mentioned in the last segment about being neighbors. The third is invest. We need to invest our time, our talent, and our treasure in the kinds of things that get us moving, our passions and so on. Obviously, this one today, Destiny Rescue, is a very important one. Number 4 is involvement. Be involved. Do something. As I suggested, you can't do everything, but do something. And then the 5th is intermix with other people, with other groups. And one of the things I'm finding out even this week, again, as I do every single week, is that there are so many different groups doing so many good things. My major problem, and this is something that I've dealt with all of my life, is I get impassioned about so many things, I get spread too thin about all of this. My wife Robin talks to me about these kinds of things. I need to focus my attention on a few things because I really do tend to get wrapped up in the kinds of things that kind of expand my horizons broader. So my problem becomes my strength through this radio program. I can acquaint other people with issues to which they can become invested and involved. So ask me how we raise awareness. This station, what you do, HB, and getting us in front of the mics, this is big stuff.
Well, thank you for that. But I know there are groups, and you know, it sounds sad, and I hate to say it, and I love Destiny Rescue and what they're doing, and other groups that have had to come about because of this dilemma. But I would love for them to not even have to exist.
Amen.
You know, just truthfully, because this has now made organizations like Destiny Rescue paramount in trying to stop this crime. Tell us about some other groups that are fighting sex trafficking here in Indianapolis, nationally and around the globe.
Absolutely. So one of my favorite organizations, I think I've said this on programs in the past, if you come in the front door of my house and you look up, you'll see an original poster from World War I from the Salvation Army. I love the Salvation Army. Their tagline is doing the most good. Gee, that sounds vaguely like Titus chapter 3, doesn't it?
I think they took a little rip off.
Yeah, you think so? Yeah, exactly. So they've got this thing, SalvationArmyUSA.org. Check them out. Combating human trafficking. There are all kinds of connections here, all kinds of little videos that you can watch and connections throughout the internet. Do go to the Salvation Army website and see what they are doing. Then Christian Broadcasting Network and their ministries. They have a huge amount of ministries that are connected with these folks, and they have all kinds of videos. So if you go to cbn.com, that's cbn.com, and check out sex trafficking there, you'll see all kinds of videos, connections to folks not only here in the United States, but around the world. This is such a huge issue. Just want to come back around to the Salvation Army again and say one more thing about them I failed to mention, and that is that they have a history of saving children. The Salvation Army was started by the Booths. Check them out in their history back in the 19th century, and one of the first things the Salvation Army did were they were saving young people, saving children from sex slavery, even in London in the 19th century. So you can go to Wikipedia, by the way. I give a shout out to all those folks put lists on Wikipedia. Just type in sex trafficking, and you'll see all kinds of groups in Wikipedia that you can check out. And then one more in this little segment. I got to say something about this group. They're very important folks. IJM, that's the International Justice Mission, IJM.org. They have a tremendous group that is international. So if you want to deal with issues of rescuing from slavery, these are the folks that are going to do this thing worldwide. I'm sure they're interconnected with all kinds of other groups like the one we have coming in today. But check them out, IJM.org.
Yeah, and anyone who knows Dr. Mark Eckel knows that you are a movie buff, and most of your education comes through teaching through the movies.
Yeah.
Tell me what movies and documentaries should people watch to truly understand sex trafficking?
Sure. So right now on my computer screen, I'm looking at the great picture of Liam Neeson with his 45 directed at the bad guys. And I got to tell you, you and I were talking off air about this. We were talking to Shaana about this off air. As a man, as a grandfather, man, this first thing that hits me is I am so mad. And I watch a movie like Taken, and I want to be Liam Neeson, man. I want to be Liam Neeson.
So you're going to get that viper.
I'm going to go get the bad guys, But truth be told, this is so implausible. I mean, these kinds of settings that Hollywood sets up for us, they get us invested in it. Sure, I think they're very important. Yes. In that sense of things, but in the real realm of the life in which we live, these things just don't happen that way. So let me give you some examples of some films that you might want to check out. I highly recommend Mira Sorvino's movie called Trade of Innocence. That's Mira Sorvino. Sorvino is a great Christian, an actress in Hollywood. I highly recommend her movie Trade of Innocence. And then if you want to go a little bit deeper, you can go to The Whistleblower, which is another Hollywood film where you have Rachel Weisz, who stars in that, The Whistleblower. You've got a documentary entitled Trade, just the word trade is an important one. You've got a number of films that include, that include The Girl Who Played with Fire. And what I'm looking at here are, just look up screenjunkies.com. You'll see 5 movies on sex trafficking. Then I wanted to mention this other group called A Heart for Justice, and they've got a whole list of films. And at the top of their list is a movie entitled Nefarious, Merchant of Souls. This is a documentary that will not only hit you between the eyes, it will slap you across the face. It will wake you up to awfulness that is going on in the city, in the nation, and in the world today. This is awful stuff. Shaana just got up and gave me her little resource packet here, and Nefarious is at the top. One more that you should at least know about, since Shaana just mentioned this, is Not for Sale. Not for Sale is another great documentary. These things will make your blood boil, but hopefully directing your antipathy and anger towards something that can be done. And when we come back, we're going to hear about the redemptive nature of all of this. Somebody who's going to come in studio and help direct our attention toward how we can actually help and love young people in these conditions.
Awesome. And we'll be right back, and you will get to meet Miss Shaana Robrock, DestinyRescue.org. You are listening to Warp and Woof Radio on the website at RadioNext.TV. RadioNext.TV on the Cool Groove site. You are listening to Warp and Woof Radio, and we have been discussing some very, very serious matters here that relate to sex trafficking. And if you haven't listened in, we definitely are going to delight you on this second hour. We have Shaana Robrock in the house, and she is with the great organization trying to prevent these crimes on a global level, DestinyRescue.org. Mark, recap the first hour, and then let's introduce the audience to our great guests.
All right. So we want to make sure that we say again that the overview of what Scripture teaches about all of these things and the interconnections with culture and so on is just very, very simple. And that is that our responsibility, whoever we are, in positions of authority, in positions of knowledge, in positions of location, is to protect people, to speak up, to say something, to participate in the community so that we can be a part of taking care of the folks that need to be taken care of the most, which is our children. So, Shaana, I'm just thrilled that you're here. I want to welcome you to the show. Shaana, as I mentioned, was a student of mine back in the 90s. And so just to start off this segment, tell us about yourself, your family, your life experiences which have really brought you to the place of involvement, support, and work for Destiny Rescue.
Great. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. I currently live in Roanoke, Indiana, which is near Fort Wayne, with my husband and our 4 kids. And my involvement with Destiny Rescue was really a classic case of, to use an Eckel phrase, God's providential good fortune.
There you go.
It was not something I sought out. It was something that was really laid in my lap. I can't really say it's by accident. I know it was very intentional by my Heavenly Father. So it was in 2013 that I traveled to Thailand for the first time with a small group of leaders from my church, Emmanuel Community Church in Fort Wayne. And our goal was simply to get an on-the-ground look at the work of Destiny Rescue to see if we could develop a potential partnership with them. So I was not initially supposed to be part of that team, but some random circumstances led me to join them. So
that's great.
Yeah, that's great.
Oh, these are really fantastic ideas here. So when you talk about your experiences and the fact that you weren't really ready for this, I mean, this is something that just kind of happened providentially. Was there anything that kind of led up to this? Any kind of specific moments or people or experiences?
Well, I was very, very blessed in that I had a lot of experiences as a teenager and in college to travel internationally and work with kids from all walks of life. And so that's always been rooted in my soul, I guess. So to interact with these kids with Destiny Rescue, it just tapped into something that I think God instilled in me from the very beginning.
That's great. You know, just to go back a few years back to high school days, you know, really, as I look at you, at what you're doing on social media and so on, I honestly don't see an awful lot of shifts or changes from where you were at back in those days. Very confident, very forthright, honest, and let people know what you really think. Those are really some great qualities that you have. And when I think about those kinds of qualities that you have, how do those qualities of being forthright and standing for what is right made a difference in how you approach Destiny Rescue?
Well, I think I have always had a sense or a need for justice.
Good for you.
And that is sometimes problematic in a very unjust world, and
Yes.
it causes turmoil in my heart and in my mind oftentimes. But what's beautiful about Destiny Rescue and other organizations like them is that it does tap into that sense of justice and allows me to act in a very practical way.
Do you see any kind of interconnectivity here with your family? You know, with your sibling, with your mom, with your dad, you know, that kind of thing. Do you see any kind of influences that have kind of led you to this point within your family?
Oh, sure. I mean, I grew up in a family of educators, and so kids and education were always a part of our life. And I do have to credit my late precious grandfather, my mother's dad, who was the one that saw when I was 16 that maybe I wasn't really great with kids. And so he and my mother colluded and forced me to work in a camp setting with at-risk youth. And it opened my eyes to various cultures and paradigms, and really that is where I think my love for kids really came from. And I didn't choose that. It was forced upon me.
How about that?
Yeah, gotta love Grandpa Smith.
That's really fantastic. I hadn't heard that story before, so that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
So in terms of your mom, for instance, still being in the classroom, what kind of impact have you had on her and she on you as you think about these justice issues? Because I know your mom, you know, is like you in that sense of things, and like me, you know, we just get impassioned about this stuff.
Yes. And I have to say, this is one of my greatest joys. Just this past fall, on our most recent trip to Thailand with Destiny Rescue, I was able to lead both my mother and my oldest daughter on that trip, along with about 8 other people. So it was such a joy for me to be able to experience that, 3 generations walking this road together. And it was such a gift to me. I will be forever grateful for that. And I'm so proud of my mom. She has taken this experience that it's rough. It is rough for it. I won't tell you how old she is. It is rough for anyone over the age of 25 to make this trip. And she was a champ, a trooper, and she returned home and vowed that her life would never be the same. And she has really been instrumental in advocating for these kids in her area.
Oh, that's so great. Just a shout out to Colleen. I love Colleen and Gordy, and we've been friends for a long, long time. Just to say this on air, Colleen is one of the greatest educators I've ever worked with. I think the world of her, and so glad that you guys, mom and daughter, make just such a huge difference in this way. But come back around to your daughter now. And talk a little bit about the impact this made on her life now after the trip.
It really, I honestly am quite surprised. She is a tender heart, and she is also very strong as well. She's a beautiful combination of those two things. But she is also a very American 15-year-old girl. At the time she was 14, she loves her iPhone, and she very much enjoys her social media presence. She's a ridiculous athlete and is quite involved in school. So I wasn't exactly sure how much this trip would impact her. She did have some exposure to Destiny Rescue prior to the trip just because of my involvement. So she was very aware of the work of Destiny Rescue and the issue of trafficking. But to see her on the ground with kids who were, for all intents and purposes, just like her, I considered it such a joy to watch the cultural barriers fall away, the language barriers, the life experience. They just were kids playing volleyball together. And to watch her connect with those girls was just a really beautiful, beautiful experience. And she was a trooper as well. There was one day that it was so hot. It was obscenely hot. Thailand is really hot. And I was honestly done for the day. And so while I and others were calmly coloring and doing some nice sitting activities in the shade, I looked up and saw my 14-year-old daughter drenched in sweat from head to toe, playing volleyball with a group of kids and them climbing all over her and pulling her to the ground. And I was waiting for her to turn around and say, "Get me out of here." And instead what I saw was her throw her head back with a laugh that I don't know that I've ever seen before or since. She was so full of joy in that moment, and it was one of the most beautiful things I think I've ever seen. And she continues to advocate for these kids on the ground in Huntington, in her high school and in her community.
Wow. When I think about stuff like this, and again, I'm going back to high school days with you, but I'm thinking about now you have your own teenager, in your own home. How important is it that students, young people, get this kind of experience face to face? I mean, right there on the ground in this experience.
I think it is valuable. I probably need to give a bit of a disclaimer in that because of the nature of the work, it is very sensitive. And I don't know that all 14-year-olds would be equipped socially, emotionally, spiritually to handle that kind of an experience. I would not have sent her had I not been there as well. There are an incredible amount of resources, however, that kids can tap into, and that's one awesome thing about Destiny Rescue is they have a fabulous program called Take a Stand where they work very directly with high school students and middle school students, empowering them and engaging them and giving them the opportunity to act.
That's really great. When I think about the impact that teenagers can have, young people have so much energy.
They do.
And that's something that I kind of feel waning in myself. I don't know if you feel
sure,
like that, but that's something certainly that impacts us as adults, I think. And so we kind of look to teenagers as this wonderful opportunity to exercise some strength and passion. But along with that, the old famous saw from Proverbs, or proverbial saying, too soon old and too late smart. And so the idea that somehow we think we got it all together at 14 or 15 just ain't even close to being the truth.
Right.
So there's that too.
Right.
Well, we have all kinds of issues and things here to get to here in this next segment. We're going to be talking about Destiny Rescue's work specifically and all the kinds of things that we do. But HB, I probably need to take a break here.
Yes, sir. And we will be back. You're listening to Warp and Woof Radio on the site. RadioNext.tv on the Cool Groove site. We are back. You're listening to the Warp and Woof Radio show every Wednesday morning, 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on the Cool Groove site. Dr. Mark Eckel opens up your mind with some perspective and some proverbs.
Yeah.
And, we are just fortunate today to have Shaana Robrock in here, and a former student of Mark's, and I was grilling him off the air trying to find out what this guy was like as a teacher, and it is all good, do good, do good, do good. Back to Warp and Woof Radio.
So we have Destiny Rescue as our real focal point today. And Shaana, why don't you spend a few minutes here telling us, describing Destiny Rescue's work generally.
Okay. Destiny Rescue operates.
Pardon moi, real quick, I think we have our caller that just called in from Destiny Rescue.
Okay, great.
Great.
That's correct.
So is this Corey?
This is Corey.
Hey, Corey, I want you to know that you're on air right now, so be careful.
Excellent. Well, it's an honor to be on your show.
Oh, great. Well, thanks so much for calling in. We're interrupting Shaana here to take your call, but we want to make sure that we connect with you about this important question. In our first hour, we talked all about the different issues and concerns that we have and the different ways people can get involved. But we want to hear from you, somebody from Destiny Rescue, to tell us about the 3 ways that anybody can get involved in Destiny Rescue.
Absolutely. Again, my name is Corey Nichols. I'm Destiny Rescue's National Director of Development. I basically help oversee our different partnerships throughout the country regarding our work. And we have 3 incredible opportunities that people can get involved directly with this issue, the issue of helping rescue children enslaved in the sex trade. I think one of the biggest challenges for people or issues that people face is, man, this is an overwhelming topic, but what can I specifically do to make a difference? And one of the opportunities that Destiny Rescue has is called Rescue a Child. The average cost it takes Destiny Rescue to rescue a child literally out of sexual slavery is $1,500. So for $1,500, somebody, one of your listeners, that maybe this issue is tugging at their heart, says, you know what? I would love to help rescue a person. You literally can help fund a rescue of a child and give them an entire different life by helping support our work through a $1,500 donation. And so what that entails is our rescue agents going undercover, and they rescue these kids, and they come back and live in one of our safe homes. So all of the operations, the amount of time leading up to the actual rescue, and then initial funds to help transport that child back into one of our safe homes, that $1,500 goes towards that. And so I can't think of anything better in life than helping rescue somebody out of the most unthinkable hell and really giving them a new future, the ability to dream again, the ability to give them their dignity back. And so we have many, many people that sign up and support our work in that capacity. And if there's a listener out there that takes that step and actually helps rescue a child, what they'll get in return is they'll get a keychain or pendant that represents one of the children that was rescued in the month that they donated. And so it's like this memorabilia. It's a reminder to say, I helped with the efforts of rescuing those kids, or one of those kids in the month that they donated. So it's
That's
pretty
great.
impactful.
That's great. What else? Go ahead.
So another opportunity, which, $1,500 might be a lot of money for some people. Another opportunity we have is called our Sponsor a Home program. For $35 a month, you can help support one of the kids that we have rescued that comes to live in one of our safe homes. So in every country that we do rescue efforts, and we have aftercare programs. And so kids that we rescue literally come to live in one of our safe homes where they get professional Christian-based counseling. All their daily needs are met. Their food, clothing, shelter. They do art therapy, dance therapy, sports therapy. We eventually will help pay for their education, and then help them learn a skill or trade. And then our case managers will help them be reintegrated back into society. And so that's $35 that somebody's helping with to support one of our safe homes. 100% of that is going towards those efforts to see these kids healed, restored, and ultimately reintegrated back into society. So that's less than $1.20 a day. People can support our homes. What's incredible about that opportunity is you'll get quarterly updates on what's happening in the home. One update that was recently given, one girl, she actually graduated from our program, and she was reintegrated back into society. And she called back in to one of our case managers and was telling just the success of her life after she'd been rescued, restored, gone through our program, and now she works at a garment factory. She's a supervisor overseeing 4 managers and a staff of 200. She gets a great income. She got married. She has a child. Her and her husband have made enough income where they're building a home for themselves. And she reached back out to Destiny Rescue and said, "Thank you so much that you would consider my life worthy enough to rescue.
That's a great story.
Because of your efforts, I'm radically, my life has taken a radical transformation, and I just want to say thank you." So when people support the efforts of our sponsor home program for $35 a month, you're seeing impacts like this on a daily basis.
Boy, that's a great story. Anything else you want to share with us this morning?
Yeah, one last opportunity, and I think this is a pretty cool thing. I'm calling all women out there who love jewelry. One of the skills or trade the girls that we rescue can do once they reach a certain age is they can learn to make jewelry. And when they make this jewelry, they get paid a wage, and our funding nations, which is one of them is the United States, purchase the jewelry off of our project nations where the kids earn an income for the jewelry they make. And we sell the jewelry in the United States. So you literally can go online and purchase our jewelry, or all you women out there, you can literally host a jewelry party. And in doing a jewelry party, you can invite your friends, and we'll ship you a box of jewelry for free. And people can purchase it. We'll provide information where people can learn about the work of Destiny Rescue, the issue of human trafficking, and then ways people can engage Destiny Rescue even beyond the jewelry party. But simply by purchasing jewelry, anybody is helping continue to rescue or restore kids. So for every $12 purchased, you're keeping one of our children employed for a day, which is an incredible opportunity. So you can go directly online. If you're interested in hosting a jewelry party, you can sign up. And you can also purchase jewelry directly online on our online store. So to find out all this information is really simple. You can find out how to rescue a child, you can figure out how to sponsor a home, and you can also learn more about our jewelry parties, or if you want to sign up and literally host a jewelry party, you can do that at destinyrescue.org.
That's great. Corey, thank you so much for your time today. Thanks for calling in. We're really grateful to hear from somebody like yourself at the national level of Destiny Rescue. Thanks so much for your time today.
Well, it's an honor to be on your show. Keep up the great work on your efforts, too. We appreciate the shout-out.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Bye for now.
Take care. Bye.
Well, we are back with Shaana because we want to talk, to kind of flesh this out a little bit more from somebody who's actually gone on these trips to emphasize the work of Destiny Rescue. Do you want to fill in any of the gaps that maybe need to be talked about that Corey didn't necessarily touch on?
Well, I thought he did a great job of explaining very specific ways that we can get involved with this operation. I do want to be really clear in maybe delineating some of the places and ways in which Destiny Rescue is involved in this fight against the trafficking of minors into the sex slave trade. We operate in several different nations globally, including Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, the Philippines, India, and the Dominican Republic.
Great.
Yes, and we, in 2015, rescued 380 kids. Since 2011, almost 1,500 children have been rescued out of sexual slavery and exploitive situations.
Wow.
Destiny Rescue has a great relationship with local initiatives as well. They partner with anti-trafficking police and other NGOs to ensure justice for these kids.
You know, honestly, I'm kind of, having to make this transition, as the guy here who's been preaching into the microphone for the first hour about the awfulness of this, but want to make sure that we talk about the redemptive efforts of
absolutely.
Destiny Rescue. So why don't you talk a little bit about that and the importance of that emphasis?
Yes, very much so. Rescue is essential. We rescue because we have to, and it is one of the steps of the process. It's essential to the cause, but the reality is the heart and soul of this ministry is in the restoration. It would be, I feel, ignorant and heartless for us to pull these kids out of a horrible situation in the short term and neglect to offer a viable long-term alternative.
Yes.
If we do not do that, they will end up exactly where they started, and perhaps in worse shape emotionally and spiritually. So we work diligently to rescue, absolutely, but the heart of the work is in the restoration. As you can imagine, our kids come to us with great need, physical, emotional, spiritual, and every one of our rescue properties is equipped with the facilities and personnel who are uniquely gifted and trained to fill these needs and to facilitate the process of restoration. We offer excellent educational and vocational training for the kids. This empowers them for when they're ready to start moving out on their own. They can learn jewelry making, as Corey mentioned. I had the great opportunity in the last couple of trips to actually sit down with some of the girls and watch and learn from them. And I'm telling you, they embarrassed me greatly. It took me about an hour to do what they were able to do in about 3 minutes. They do beautiful, beautiful work, and every piece of that jewelry is handmade by one of our girls in a very safe and loving environment. One of the other really cool things that Destiny Rescue offers as an option for the kids is a sewing program. And we also have a cafe that is open to the public, and it's beautiful. They have food and a full coffee bar. The girls can learn to be barista or cook or waitress. In Thailand specifically, the hospitality industry is huge. So these are very viable skills for these kids to walk away with. One of my favorite parts of the vocational training process is our hair school option.
Oh, neat.
There is a salon training center right on the campus of the Chiang Rai property, and the girls are trained by exceptional leaders who just love on them and instruct them, and these girls walk away with really viable employment opportunities. So, wow. And I've had my hair cut there several times, and they do a great job.
You have personal experience.
I do, and not everyone gets to touch my hair. So,
oh, that's really great. So, tell us. You've been telling about some of these trips. Tell us how many trips you've been on. And then what do you hope to accomplish with those who accompany you?
Sure. I'm about ready to take trip number 4 this fall.
Okay.
This past trip, as I mentioned before, was especially exciting because I got to take along my 14-year-old daughter and my mother. And my daughter also had a friend with her and her mother. And we take people from all walks of life. We have nurses and educators and businessmen and women, grandmas, students. We run the gamut. And it's a very diverse experience for everyone who goes along. As far as what I hope to accomplish on these trips, it's a little complicated in that I know that God has uniquely designed each one of us. So 10 different people can take the exact same experience and the same scenario and walk away with 10 completely different perspectives. So I don't want to limit the work that God can do uniquely for each person. But having laid that disclaimer, the overall goal really for me, and I believe for Destiny Rescue, is to personalize the process and to impassion the people. So,
personalized and impassioned. Wonderful.
That's right. Now, we want to put faces in front of statistics and empower local people to join this fight.
Those are really great ideas. You know, when we talk about these trips and the kinds of things that you've been doing, we really haven't talked about how these things look. Mm-hmm. So from start to finish, describe and explain everything that takes place in one of your trips.
Okay, that is absolutely impossible to do.
Okay, all right.
I work very hard with highly trained personnel of Destiny Rescue. These people know what they're doing. They have done this many, many times, and we work diligently to introduce our team trip members to each of the very diverse elements of Destiny Rescue's ministry, and they are vast. As I mentioned, we operate in multiple nations. So my experience personally is just in Thailand. So I can speak to that. The trip is a whirlwind in some ways, visiting rescue homes and learning centers, vocational training centers, and prevention homes, which we have yet to discuss, as well as a walkthrough of 1 or 2 red light districts in Bangkok. We aren't necessarily there to work, per se. These are vision trips. They are specially designed to highlight Destiny Rescue's work and the redemptive power of God's incredible grace and love for his kids. We do participate and lead some language training initiatives and host spiritual development workshops of sorts for the kids. And we play. We play a lot. And it's not just for lack of anything better to do. It's because this play experience is therapeutic. And it's educational for both the kids and the team trip members. It's through this play that we begin to break down barriers and make connections, human connections.
There you go.
It's where we begin to see the kids not just as numbers, but as these beautifully resilient and intelligent works of art that they are. It's where things get really real.
This always, whenever I hear people talk about these kinds of things, I think about the incarnation of Jesus, that he came in flesh, he came to meet us where we were, where we are, and of course that's exactly what our responsibility is, to do exactly that. We meet people where they're at. We don't expect some kind of instantaneous change or any kind of change. You know, our responsibility is just to be with them. One of the things you mentioned that I want to come back to before we go on to anything else is your comment about the red light district. And in our conversations off air, one of the things that you and I talked about was the process by which you go about your trips. Some things have to lead into others. And you told me that you save the red light walkthrough for the last part of this.
Yes.
Explain why that is, why that's so important.
It really is important. It's essential for our team trip members to establish connections with these kids and with this ministry on a very human level before we introduce them to the horror. We never want to communicate that these kids are powerless victims. Once they are rescued out of that situation, they are victors. And for our team trip members to experience the red light district after they've witnessed the restoration process in various stages of development for each individual person, it really allows them to have a full circle moment, to see these kids as empowered and intelligent and beautiful and amazing kids, not as victims. So it's a painful experience, I would say. For some, it's a little more painful than it is for others, but to have it at the end really is a benefit in that people are able to look back and go, oh my goodness, I can't believe so-and-so was just doing this, and look at her now. It's constantly reinforcing the victor mentality for these kids.
The redemptive idea.
The redemption of it all.
Yeah. When I think about what I'm hearing you say and about the kinds of things that you're going through, just generally speaking, it seems to be something that the comfortable American that we are, you know, has a real problem maybe overcoming this simply because we see things in a certain way. You used the word horror when you were describing this. Why is it necessary to help people to understand horror in this life?
Well, I think initially to spur them on to act. You can't, I mean, if you look at the scriptures themselves, it's not a bunch of ponies and roses. Scripture itself is full of really horrifying things. And what is beauty without that other side? Yeah. And I always go back to this, and I've told this story a million times, so for people who I've spoken to before, I'm sorry, but I constantly think back to my first trip through the red light district. I had no idea what to expect. It was the very end of our trip. I had not slept in 2 days. I was done. I was ready to go home, and we took a quick trip through the red light district in the middle of the night, and it was so hot. It was one of those hot August nights that the sounds and the smells suffocate you, and I was actually bordering on nausea. And as I was walking through Lana Plaza, one of the red light districts of Bangkok, I paused mid-stride and locked eyes with one of the young ladies who was working the red light district, and I saw the most, to use the word again, horrifying things, in that when I looked in her eyes, there was nothing there. It was this cold and lifeless void that haunted me. That light in her eyes had just completely vanished. But the interesting thing is that despair that came over me in that moment was really quite short-lived, because I just had to recall just hours before, when I was in the company of some of the most beautiful young women in Chiang Mai, Thailand, in a Destiny Rescue home. This home was full of girls who, not too long ago, were living this exact same life. And the difference was, for these girls in a Destiny Rescue home, the light was there. It had returned, and it had returned with a vengeance for some of these girls. And that experience allowed me to put all of the pieces together. And the pain, the rescue, the redemption, it was a true full circle moment. So,
you know, sometimes I really get upset with Christians generally. I get upset with Christians, you know, on a usual regular basis, actually. But this is one of those times, you know, because we're talking about something called horror. And quite frankly, if you're growing up in a suburban middle-class, upper-middle-class mentality, you know, you're hitting that white button at, you know, and your garage door comes down, and you basically are shutting off the world.
Right.
And we sometimes, I think, need to be upbraided with the stark reality of what horror really is.
Oh, yes.
So that's why I wanted you to expand on that a little bit. You told us some of the stories about children whose lives have been changed by this, and then, of course, some of the people that have been taken on these trips and their lives have been impacted. Do you have any follow-up ideas to either of those, either to the children whose lives have been changed or those who have gone on to these trips? Okay. Any other that you want to bring up at this point?
Well, Corey mentioned Lawan was a young lady who was one of our Destiny Rescue girls, and her story is amazing. I personally have a connection with a young lady named Wen, and she is exquisitely beautiful. She is a smart mouth. And I love that about her. She is just a really unique girl, and she, like so many others, was tricked by a family friend. Her family was destitute, desperately needed income. She thought she was going to the city to work in a restaurant, washing dishes, maybe someday working her way up to wait tables, but instead she found herself in a bar, not washing dishes, not waiting tables. But at the age of 13, she was bought and sold into a life of sexual slavery. And I cannot imagine being 12, 13, you don't know anyone, can't speak the language, you have no identification, no education. It could be paralyzing. And for no other reason than geography. When could be you, could be me, could be my kid. Right. And I don't know, I think back to one of my favorite memories is when my kids were really little and their daddy would play hide and seek with them. I'd hear them say, Daddy, find me. And he'd call out, Morgan, Maddie, come out, wherever you are. And even though he almost always knew exactly where they were, he would shuffle around parts of the house and calling their name, Maddie Morgan, Macy, come out, wherever you are. And we'd hear them laugh and giggle and rustle around. And one last, come out, wherever you are. You know, you play that. Do you play that with Marilyn?
Oh,
yes. But then that moment would happen. You'd hear him say, there you are. I see you. I found you. And even though the whole point of the game was to stay hidden, man, they love to get found, don't they?
Exactly right, yeah.
And I just treasure that visual image of him scooping them up in his arms and declaring, I found you. And I can't help but think how much like our Heavenly Father that is. He knows where we're hiding all the time, and he never stops whispering, come out, wherever you are. And despite our best efforts to stay hidden, sometimes due to our own sin nature, and sometimes because we don't feel like we're worth finding, he keeps seeking us until that moment we emerge and he scoops us up in his arms and he says, I see you. I found you. And we're called to model that with others, to love our sisters, both locally and globally, in the same way that he has loved us. Our rescue agents travel to some of the most horrible places on earth, spending hours in spaces that you and I would never dream of going, and our staff work tirelessly in the prevention and rescue homes, communicating to these kids, come out, wherever you are. I see you. I found you. And that to me is the beautiful, just awe-inspiring part of Destiny Rescue's work.
This is just, it's kind of breathtaking to hear you say it that way. The visual and verbal connection to your husband's little game, but also obviously to us as human beings, to Christians, but also to these little ones that you're working so tirelessly to help. You said that you're actually having a national meeting right now in Warsaw. Is that correct?
It's Syracuse. Yep, Warsaw area.
Syracuse. Okay. All right. Great. And any kind of things that the folks there would like to hear a shout out about this morning from you?
Yeah, the big dogs are all in town, right? And I scurried away to Indianapolis. So, yeah, they're doing great work. They work so hard, and they are coming from all over the world. We have people in from Australia, and I believe our country manager from Cambodia is in town as well. So, yeah.
In little Syracuse, Indiana.
Yes, in beautiful Syracuse, Indiana.
It is that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Do you have any other stories that you want to tell us about, generally speaking, that you want to just kind of coming toward the end of this piece with us today?
I just really want to reinforce the idea that any one of us can join this fight. I am no scholar. I have a college education, but it's certainly not in this department. I don't want to say just a mom, but for the purpose of this discussion, I'm a mommy. Excuse me. It's not limited to folks with a specialized degree or huge bank accounts. It's the soccer mom, the accountant, the student. It's every one of us. And when I get tired or busy, I just have to picture two faces. One is Wen, who I talked to you about a little bit ago, and my daughter. They are both 15 now. They're both spectacularly beautiful and sassy, and they are both desperately loved. The difference comes in their histories. One, my daughter, Maddie, and the other, Wen, a Destiny Rescue treasure. She's doing beautifully well now, but here's the deal. I am confident that if at any point my Madeline, my beautiful 15-year-old American daughter, was taken from me and forced to live a life of unimaginable terror, one that required her to service multiple men a night in the back room of some seedy bar or brothel, I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that an army of people would rise up to pull her from that pit. No expense would be spared by this community to rescue her, and there is no conceivable barrier that we would not cross to bring that girl to healing. And initially, Wen did not have that. She didn't have a mother who would bleed for her before she allowed her daughter to live in this way. She didn't have a community that was passionately committed to her safety and her wholeness. And she didn't have a faith that would sustain her through night after miserable night until Destiny Rescue, until they pulled her from that pit and she began the process of restoration. And it brings me an inexplicable joy to know that her light is back, Because when I see Wen, I see my girl, I see my Maddie. And I just want to ask people of my community and the people listening today, who do you see? Do you see your kid? Do you see your neighbor girl? Do you see your student? And what would you do to rescue her? There are so many more kids like Wen, and each one of us can be the one that fights for her. We can be the hands and the feet and the voice that speaks for those who cannot speak for themselves. We can be a part of the greatest hide-and-seek game of this generation. And join with Destiny Rescue, whispering gently to kids just like precious Wen, I see you, I found you. And that is the most beautiful thing that I can conceive of in my mind.
Putting a face to what we experience, flipping through our phones or looking at a computer screen to say, this is my kid.
It's my kid.
Yeah. Man, Shaana, this has been groundbreaking to have you here to talk about Destiny Rescue's work. This podcast will be available in a couple of days. We'll push it out in lots of different directions. We hope that you put it in lots of different places.
Yeah.
Everybody that's connected to Destiny Rescue, same thing goes for you. HB, this has been a tough 2 hours to talk about these things, but really liberating in some ways as well.
Let me say this.
Yeah.
Watching your student do what she's doing, man, just makes me proud to be your partner. Seriously.
Thanks, man.
And thank you, Shaana, for
you.
what you're doing. This is powerful.
Yeah.
And we have to change this information and make sure that we save our young people.
Yep.
We're going to come back to you next Wednesday, 10 a.m., 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Warp and Woof Radio. Dr. Mark, we are out. Thank you again, Shaana.
Thank you.
Destiny Rescue.